All right, let's talk about, I could go around the room and ask you about the most important asset as a paragliding pilot. What is the most important asset that you believe that you need to have as a pilot? All of you's probably got a little different answer, and it'd be really interesting to go around the room and talk about all of your individual answers right now. But probably one of, if not the most important asset that you need as a paragliding pilot is your instinct. At the end of the day, it is going to be all you've got. It's all you've got at the beginning, the launch, when you're in the air, and then making the decisions when you're learning. It's a very individual sport. It's all about you, and you're constantly making the decisions on your own. So some pilots come into this game and they've got naturally a fantastic instinct. Not all pilots have a great instinct, but all instincts can be developed. And developing an instinct comes through experience, comes through knowledge, comes through just being exposed to the sport, weather apps, flying stories, information, taking it all in to develop that instinct, because the more you have, the more you learn when things start happening, either on launch or in the air. That instinct is going to make you get down safely. You'll have a lot of pilots that talk about, okay, I'm really looking for my PB on the coast. I want to fly 2 to 3 hours today because I want to rack up my hours. Other pilots are talking about, I'm really looking to fly my 100 Ks XC. I want to do 200, 300 Ks XC. That's my priority for the day. No, it is not your priority for the day. The number one priority for you as a paragliding pilot, hands down, always number one, and should never move. My priority for the day is to land safely today. And the rule, or the number thing that comes in behind that, is I landed safely today and I flew for 2 hours on the coast. I had an awesome 3 hours. Hey, I clocked over my 100. But the objective of the game is to get your feet back on the ground safely every single time. So how do we do that? We start using our instinct. Back to that. So weather. Let's talk about Hickson Street. One of the greatest beginner sites I think you could ever find anywhere in the world. How do we fly it safely? The first thing that you're looking for in the early days of piloting is consistency. Consistency, first of all, in the forecast, and then consistency in the moment. That's how you want to elongate your flying career as far as coastal soaring is concerned. You want to have your wind arrows on your app, you want to have the forecast, and there's going to be some consistency. So Hickson Street is a simple one. It's going to be out of the south, and it's going to be either south-southeast. So first of all, your arrows in your forecast, you're looking for your south-southeast. So if you're looking for that, then you know the direction is going to be good. Hickson Street is really, really safe when it's out of the south or south-southeast. The wind strength then comes into play that makes it a dangerous site beyond that. When it starts bending around to the southeast or going around to the east, then it becomes a little bit more dangerous. So if you want to fly Hickson Street, you want to rack up your hours in the early days, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for southerly. There's two kinds of southerlies really that are going to come into play here. It's your prefrontal change and then the actual front. I've gone through this before in some of the other talks, and how important this is about not flying the prefrontal. As you go through this game, you'll see some guys take some chances and they'll play and they'll fly the prefrontal. Our first death in Newcastle, Joel was current Australian hang gliding champion. Joel was on launch at Strzelecki and he set up in prefrontal thinking that it was going to be okay. He had a bunch of guys, he was a hang gliding pilot, a bunch of guys hanging onto his pilot, onto his glider, harnessed in. When once he's harnessed in, he's locked in. He said it's all good to go. He said release. Released, but the wind, the actual front had not come through. Pretty much as he released, the actual front came through, flipped Joel over, we lost Joel. We had a paragliding death on the Central Coast. I can't remember his name, flying prefrontal. Same thing, suddenly comes through, having a cracker of a day at crack neck, super high, awesome, actual southerly came through, blew him back. So I've seen a lot of pilots fly here, one of our most experienced. He'd probably get up and have a talk to you. Conrad, incredible hang gliding pilot, paragliding pilot, got dragged at Dixon Park not that long ago, flying prefrontal. Prefrontal, so what is it? What is a prefrontal, and what is the southerly, and what is the change? Here where we are exposed to the Coriolis force, the bending of everything. Everything here in the southern hemisphere where we are right now is pulling to the left. Who learned in Bali? Anyone learn in Bali? Bali, completely different story. You've got a beautiful, consistent wind. A lot of guys now learning in Bali because you're in the trades. The wind's continuously traveling in the dry season from an east to west direction. Very consistent, wind speed, direction. It can be kind of like a false sense, actually. It's a pretty dangerous place to learn how to fly, because you may then come back to our flights here or further south and start to think that it's going to be consistent. It is not going to be consistent here because we're affected by the Coriolis force. So we're affected by the southerly, which is coming off, well, the rotating, which is traveling the opposite direction, the roaring 40s, which are going from the west to east. It's a pulse of cold air that comes through, and it's really quite dense. As that pulse of air comes through, think of a ship in the water. There's a little pre-wave ahead of the ship. The big ships, you think it's the ones where the dolphins are riding beautifully down in front. The same thing happens in the atmosphere. The change will come through ahead of. It'll be prefrontal, and there's an area in it where the wind swings, and you can think that it's perfectly safe to fly. Joel was Australian hang gliding champion. He should have known better that day. He should not have released, and he shouldn't have harnessed in. But he was really, really keen to fly. And the crazy thing about Joel's death, there was like 20, 30 minutes afterwards, it was perfectly okay. Beginners were flying that day because the front went through. So that's the first thing to remember. As a beginner, and highly recommended, I can't ever recommend flying prefrontal no matter. Some guys will take the chance and they'll fly that little window and then they'll put it down because you know your instinct that the real shit's coming through real soon. But the thing is to wait until the front has gone through. And so then you have your maximum wind speed and then it starts to drop back. That's a great wind to fly during the beginner intermediate years, particular at Hickson Street, because once you've got it directly out of the south, there's no Venturi in the little gully behind you. A Venturi is the path of least resistance. Think of a stream, you've got two rocks. In between the two rocks, the water is flowing really fast in between the two rocks. That part of the stream is much wider, the water is moving much slower. The same thing is happening with the air. We get a lovely little Venturi. So when it's strong, the air is flowing up that little gap to the left of Hickson Street somewhat faster. Guys have got blown back a couple of years ago. Guys got blown into power lines because they went straight down into the Venturi. So out of the south, it's a beautiful airflow over Hickson Street. South-southeast is a beautiful airflow all the way through it. So it's really, really safe. So the only thing that makes it unsafe is that maximum wind speed. So if we're waiting for the front to go through, and then it's dropping. And so what you're looking at for your wind speeds, you want it to drop below 30 kilometers an hour. But if you're a beginner, it's still going to be pretty strong up there. So you're really looking for a beautiful airflow around about, and I'm saying kilometers, not knots, keep it simple, 22 to 26 kilometers an hour. And you want that. You want your apparent wind around that, and you don't want massive wind gusts. We had a moment the other week, I think somebody asked online about, hey man, I want to go flying, but the wind gusts were massive, like in between the two. That is not a consistent day. You want that consistent airflow in the early days because it just makes for really nice flying. You don't have to stress about it. Because remember, down here on the surface, all of our air is traveling in an east, west, north direction. But it's actually going up and down, and as you go thermally, you start to understand that more and more. The air can't go down any further beyond our feet when we're standing on launch. It still feels like it's coming out of east-west. When we have those days on the coast where the gusts were going up, it was a highly unstable day. There was probably big clouds. I didn't see it that day. There would have been clouds and potentially showers as well. They are not the days to be flying. If you've got big wind gusts in between the two, it's not the day. Again, you want that consistency. You want to be looking at it. It's out of the south, it's dropped below that 30 Ks. It's now 28 or below. The wind gusts are consistent, and they're the days to start racking up those hours at Hickson Street. What are the dangers with Hickson Street? Well, as you move through the day, sometimes it'll hold out of the south. You can have it all day and hold out of the south-southeast. The front's gone through and everything is all set up. But everything's going to start pulling to the left. So everything through the day, which happens so often, we start flying at first through Hickson Street and then it starts going around to the southeast and then it'll go around to the east. So the more it goes around, the more dangerous Hickson Street becomes. Because now the mistakes, or most of the accidents that have happened, are from pilots making bad decisions due to a changing wind direction. Again, we come back to the most important asset, your instinct. When you're flying your glider and you're ridge soaring, you're starting to notice you've got a really even speed. You're going left, you're going right, you've got a beautiful even speed. But then all of a sudden you start going south, and it starts going, let's keep it for real. You start going north and you start going a little bit slower because now the wind is coming around. And there's been too many pilots that are still flying the southern side of the cliff face. So as the air is coming around, and it doesn't matter, but most of the time on the east, the majority of the time, 60 to 80%, unless you have one like a little trough line we had and switched back to the south, which certainly can do. But 80% of the time, the wind on the east coast is going to be bending more around to the east. So you're working with it. So when you're coming down, flying into the weak or the side that isn't going, there's going to be a venturi. Again, the path of least resistance. The air is coming in and then it's wrapping around the cliff, so there's no lift. It's not going up and over. It's coming up and over on the north side, but now it's going side. So guys are still turning too south, and there's been too many pilots that have then turned with no lift, and it causes you then to land where you don't want to land. You haven't got as much control. So again, when you're in flight, you're using your instinct. You're monitoring your ground speed by the cliff face, and if it's starting to shift, you know the air is coming around. So as you move through your years, you start understanding, but if you're not comfortable, you're going to use your instinct and take a really good run down the beach and land safely down the beach, because you're not going to have that venturi down to the beach. It'll be cross and turn around and come head to wind. But you do not want to be landing down in that part of the cliff or getting low. A lot of the time, or Bali or cliff face or ridge soaring, that is a dangerous place to be. As you go advanced, once we get to Bombala, same thing there. The wind starts out beautifully out of the east and it starts shifting around a little bit more. You decide to take a run, and I swear probably most of intermediate and advanced pilots have had this moment. You take a run down to Redhead and then it gets scary coming back because the air has come around a little bit and you've got no penetration and you're starting to lose your height. That's a scary place to be, and you've got to be really, really smart. We can talk about how to get out of it. But in the beginning years, you just don't want to put yourself in that situation. You want to be knowing that your wind is square on. Okay, so now we have this beautiful site in Newcastle, so we're flying the south, and that's the majority of your growth, and you're doing really, really quite well there at Hickson Street. And then we'll talk about the cliff faces as they come around, the direction as they come around, but you're following the wind. You want the wind square on the majority of the time. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. You just don't want to be into the habit of like continuously flying a cliff because that's where the wind was when you started. You've got to be making the adjustments as you go through to make sure that your glider is using the air that's hitting the front of the cliff. So we've got these lovely rounding cliffs from Hickson Street and then Strzelecki and then Bombala where we can grow, and that air is coming around and it's going to change through the season. So the air is coming right around to the east-southeast and we've got directly east at Bombala. But that is a major, very important part of not getting to the edge of the cliff. You kind of got me on the beginners, you understand what I'm talking about, is making sure that that air is square, and that's monitoring your own speed, and when it starts to change, the air is changing.
And it can certainly be quite variable. And I remember we had last season, Pato was in the air, myself about 4 others, and it went from southeast to northeast in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that changed, like there was a bunch of guys out on the front face, and then suddenly on the northeast, the lift just dropped away. Now luckily in Hickson Street, everyone was just on the beach.
Yeah.
But the rate of change of the wind direction was really quite, I've never seen it swing that quickly, but it happened very, very quickly, and you've got to have a good out plan.
Yeah, exactly, and a great out plan, and exactly, and you can start to feel this, and you can start to know this. There's one of the big clues is, when you're flying, the higher you are, it can be more dangerous that you're in the higher you are, but the higher you are, when you do have higher wind speed, the air is traveling faster as you're higher, so sometimes you can start getting parked, especially on Hickson Street. You're really, really quite high, then all of a sudden I've got great height, but I'm not going forward. And then if you look out on the water and it's starting to white cap, get it down pretty fast. Because the air over the top is starting to travel really quite quickly. And so you're almost parked, then you've got a speed bar down So the air may be changing. Because remember, the air above the surface has no friction at the surface, so it's going to start traveling a lot quicker. So you have this lovely little monitor in your head. The higher you are, you've got a good reading. If you've got a lot of height and you're really quite comfortable, you still really got good forward penetration, again, the air is consistent. And that's what you're always looking for in the early days of your paragliding. If it's shifting and it's not right, if it's really low down, there's low wind speed down below, and then you get up high and it's really quite strong, get down. It's not consistent. You know, there's going to be a change. That faster moving air mass over your head, you know, could potentially, you know, and likely is going to drop and therefore potentially blow you back. You know, so, you know, height gives you a great deal of knowledge, you know, as well. But if you've got a beautiful, consistent day, again, it all's coming through. The most beautiful days to fly on the coast are actually the days that have a little bit less humidity in them. So the southerly comes through. Usually the southerly's got quite a lot of humidity, but we do have some very dry southerlies. I think you guys had some beautiful days recently. Absolutely cracking. So the less humidity is, we don't have to go into that too much because, you know, it's getting off the track, but they are the beautiful coastal drags because simply there's a greater amount of air mass. There's more air. The less humidity there is, there's more air, and your glider also flies better. It likes less humidity as well, and they are the beautiful days that we're also looking for. So you can have these southerlies, which we had one the other day. I think it started out cloudy in the morning, and it went beautifully blue. You know, so the air mass that was coming through was dry. So they are really, really lovely. The other site for beginners is, I don't know how many people are flying there much these days, is Catho. Different enemy. You can fly Catho a lot more not an enemy, it's our friend. But Catho is different because it's more of a sea breeze that's coming in from the east. It's low to the ground, it's not a high launch, so you're usually flying fairly high wind speed. And you've got to be really, really careful with Catho because if it's a sea breeze, chances are it's going to grow through the day. So a sea breeze is going to increase in speed. You know, more so after the southerly front has gone through, the southerly will slowly drop off through the day. A sea breeze is the opposite. A sea breeze flying at Bombala or, you know, Catherine Hill Bay, a lot of the time it's a window opportunity. You know, so you're taking the wind, it's really good, it's nice and square, but as you move through the day, the wind starts building in speed, and therefore you've got to, again, pick your moment, you go and land. You don't want to be hanging in there too long because a sea breeze can build quite dramatically and quite quickly. And again, if it is building, and if you're a beginner, you shouldn't have been flying that anyway, because chances are in all of your forecast apps, you haven't got a beautiful, consistent arrow. You've got maybe a good direction that's consistent, but you'll notice that it's increasing throughout the day. So you've taken a chance and you've flown a window. So you've got to be very, very careful. If you're choosing to fly a window, be prepared to have your out. You know, never fly without your out to get down as quickly as possible. Because again, we're going back to rule number one. You want to land safely at the end of the day. So as you go through your progression, you start to take more and more chances and you start to fly more and more different winds, etc. And it's all going to start changing as you go in. So those early days are the ones you want to look for on your apps and forecasts, and then we start taking some, I guess, opportunities because we want to push it a little bit further. Anything else that you wanted to talk about, like as far as the local sites are concerned?
Top landing at Hickson.
Top landing at Hickson, okay, really, top landing at Hickson is really interesting, and it's a great place to rack up the top landings. When it is dead out of the south. Now, two things I didn't talk about too, south-southwest. If it is a little bit, slightly off to the west, you're going to have a bit of bump and rotor. Don't recommend that at all in the early days. As you get on, I kind of like enjoy it. I don't mind a little bit of bump because I like it, but don't fly it if it's got any form of west in it. When you have got south in it, directly out of the south, and it is strong, it's actually quite hard to put your glider down at Hickson Street. So, you know, that is big ears landing, top landing, but you don't want to get to that straight off unless you're really familiar with how to use your big ears and big ears top landing. So the more the wind comes off at Hickson Street, the easier it gets. It's this lovely little pocket in between dead south and south-southeast. And then once you get around to that south-southeast, as that air is coming around, the wind direction is coming around, this is where Hickson Street starts to get somewhat dangerous. Because first of all, going back to what I said, the southern side of the cliff face, you do not want to be landing down there. You will come down very, very fast, and there's rocks down there. You know, you want to have plenty of height, make it down to the beach or into the sandy. You want to be facing the wind if you can. You don't want to come down the venturi. But the other thing that happens as the air mass comes around, we start to get a little rotor that forms in behind Hickson Street into that pitted out area that's off to the side. Okay, so there's two choices there. You can get enough height, you jump over the top of it and land at Hickson Street. Again, I wouldn't be worrying about that. If you're a beginner and you're focusing on your top landings, you want it beautifully out of the south-southeast, so it's just a little bit off, and the lift band isn't as strong. And you can literally rack them up one after the other, and it's a really, really great place to build your top landing skills. But again, you want the conditions to be right. Again, go back to the first thing I said, your instinct. If you've come over and it's not right, I'm coming over Hickson Street and I'm not going down, well, it's not right, don't force it until you start to become a really good top lander. And the other side of things, if I come over and I'm going down way too quick, don't worry about it. Because when the air is right over Hickson Street, it is actually a beautiful place to learn how to top land. And you can do one after the other safely and beautifully. But if the air is a little bit off, it starts to change. So doing your top landings, you're looking at probably a south-southeast around about 24 to 26 kilometres an hour, maybe 22 to 26 kilometres an hour, and it's a beautiful place, and you'll be able to rack them up, and you can start to feel your glider, and you can also start to imply a little bit of big ears, if you want to come in for your landing, and learning your big ears landings is incredibly handy. It's a very important arsenal in your skills to have. When you need to get down quickly and learn how to use it, it's incredibly handy. You can use it for so many different occasions. Again, as an advanced pilot, different scenarios, whole heap of different ones. But again, Hickson Street gives you that beautiful ability to master big ears landing, but it has to be a little bit on the strong side. And there's a couple of ways to do that we won't talk about. We'll continue talking about the weather, but that's what you're looking for big ears. Or any questions in regards to that? Yep.
Just talk us through a big ears landing.
Well, big ears landings, if you want to start using them in ridge soaring, but obviously incredibly handy when you need to get out of the sky fast. You can use it in all sorts of different occasions. In Hickson Street, when you've got it right and the conditions are beautiful, you want it fairly strong. You pretty much want to be holding in normal at trim. You're going to be almost just kind of holding your height over launch. It's not so fast that you get blown back. You don't want that. You don't want to be in that situation at Hickson Street. So it's a nice wind speed. So as you come over Hickson Street, you pretty much over launch, and then you apply big ears. So you pull your big ears and you've got control. You've got to make sure you're still keeping your brakes in. And I've changed over the years, and your teacher, I'm not a certified teacher, this is how I do it, but get advice off your teacher if you haven't done this. Big ears is just applying the big ears, and then the pressure of big ears on you is when to release. And depending on your wing, some wings release really, really quickly. Beginner wings will pop out really, really fast. The higher you go up into aspect ratio, the slower your big ears will come out. So some are really, really slow and they want to hang in there and they'll want to flap around. So you need to get to know your wing as far as big ears are concerned. But big ears is going to bring you down quite quickly. This is how I do it when it's really, really strong. I love strong wind flying. I use big ears quite a lot there, and I've changed over the years. This is how I've done it. I mean, I'm sure James has advice on that one as well. But how I love big ears, when I need to come home, it's really strong, and I'm holding, I'm not coming down, so I just apply big ears. And with it, I can actually still control a bit of brake with mine. Because I use a smaller wing mostly, and so I can still hold a little bit of brake as well, which can slow me down a little bit. Remember, big ears is going to compress your wing, and this is why big ears is nice to know in different kind of equations. That's compressing the wing, what's left of it. So even though you have less wing, it's actually less susceptible to collapse. So it's nice and strong, it's nice and sturdy, and it's a strange sensation to get used to as you're coming down to the ground. Now, as you come down to the ground, this is the choice that you have to make. Are you going to release your big ears before you get to the ground? If it's quite strong, you're going to go back up again. But if the wind is quite light, you can hold big ears, and then you can just release beforehand, and if you've got big ears, it'll pop out nicely and it'll be a touchdown. But when it's really, really strong, and when you really need big ears to save your life or get down really, really fast, you're going to hold big ears until you get to the ground. Now, doing that, you may come down really, really fast, so you've got to be prepared for that. you know, and you've got to get to know your wing, and you can only do that out of learning big ears out of the right conditions. So what I do with big ears, when I've got to get down really, really fast, I'm holding down my big ears and I'm coming down pretty quick, and as soon as I'm down, and then I collapse the wing as fast as I can and bring it around straight away. That's a really fast, quick way to land. The other one is just let them pop out as your toes come down. But again, depending on your wings, all of your wings are going to behave differently. So get to know your big ears landing. So so, you know, but find out, get control of your big ears. There's different ways, but straight away is like kill that wing, because if it's going to be strong, you're going to get dragged back.
Sounds like something good to practice on the beach.
Yeah, absolutely. Or definitely, But get used to your big ears when it's a beautiful day, get them used to the feel of it, you know, and practicing your landings, you know, and if there's a lot of uplift, but, you know, I mean, sometimes you just have to use big ears, even thermally, when you need to get down fast, but most of the time you're going to open your wing inland before you get down. But if it's really, really strong and you're getting blown back, you want big ears. I've had to land inland big ears from getting blown backwards.
Gavin, what about when there's a lot of dark clouds around, but the wind seems consistent when you look at sea breeze? Is that all right to fly in that?
Okay, so when we're talking about thermic conditions on the coast, now thermals obviously happen on the coast. The danger, it can be dangerous, but it can be great. This is a tricky one. Cold air over the top. Okay, so the darker the cloud, where the cloud is grey, it just simply means that the light is not coming through. So the darker the cloud, the higher the cloud is on the top. And it's a really good tip to know when you start thermaling as well. When it's getting really, really dark, don't go near the dark part, because that means it's really sucking up really, really hard and fast. When you start to have a lot of cloud, it means that it's somewhat colder over the top than what it is down on the surface. Okay, so if you've got a nice warm ocean, cold air over the top can start to make it a little bit unstable. So, you know, the thermals can come through. So the thermals are going to create wind gusts, but they can also be kind of fun as well. I love flying in the mornings because the air, and late in the afternoons, particularly in August, because the air over the top of the ocean is colder than the ocean itself. And so that air coming in off the ocean is hitting a cliff, and that's quite warm air, and it's getting forced up a little ways. But the air layer over the top is quite colder, so it's going to keep going up. And those kind of days can be those beautiful lifty days. You get them a lot, like March, April can be really, really good. You can get them in the spring. The mornings in the summer, they can happen as well. You'll have, you know, the southerly's gone through, so the air coming over what is a really warm ocean. I did most of all of my early coastal PBs and flight heights and distances up and down the coast in the mornings, because the air coming off that southerly, remember the cold air coming off the southern part of the ocean is more dense there because it's colder and heavier. So once it hits the cliff face, rather than roll over it, it's going to tend to want to keep going up. So sometimes you have those days where you're flying, and as you said, you've got these beautiful lines of dark clouds up and down the coast. So that is the air that is coming in off the ocean, hitting the cliffs, and it's getting forced up. It's orographic lift. And it's a mixture of thermic lift and orographic lift. It's being forced up for the first bit, and that's the part that you're riding. And then it keeps going in behind you, and then it's getting sucked up, and, you know, the heat from the suburbs behind you is getting sucked up. So you can see this lovely big line. In the mornings, you'll see a lot, this lovely big long line that will happen at Hickson Street. So that is that air that is being drawn in and then being forced up. So they can be really, they're the good ones. The bad ones are like the other day when you had the wind gusts, when it's too cold over the top. So now we're turning into an unstable situation. So the air, the gusts on the surface are just too big. It's not a day that you want to fly. You know, so because it's become too unstable. So the wind gusts, and what that is, and simply what that is, if something's going up, something's coming down. So those blue sections, or those part sections out there, is where the air is falling, and that's hitting the water, and that's coming across much faster. So that's why we're getting massive readings, you know, at our anemometers, all our, you know, our weather stations, where the wind speeds are saying 22 apparent wind, and then it's saying 34 wind gusts. You know, it's an unstable day. So again, that comes back to the other one. We want to fly the consistent days. So the bigger, the darker the cloud, the more unstable that it's becoming. Because again, going back to the air isn't just moving east, west, north, and south. It's going up and it's going down very fast. So the more activity up is creates more activity down, and so more activity down is creating stronger wind gusts. So again, they are not the days to fly.
Maybe you can just give us a bit of an explanation of the bubble that occurs in Bombala.
Yep.
And particularly if you do make your way out to that front pyramid, you shouldn't be flying the redhead if you're PG3.
No, yeah, 100% no. Yeah, yeah.
But if you do it at the pyramid, when you turn, you're coming back in with the tailwind.
Yep.
What you should be mindful of is you're coming back in towards the wind.
Yeah. Bombala is one of the most unique microclimates I think you're ever going to find anywhere as a paragliding pilot. So in the early days it can be really, really dangerous, and it's probably always going to be dangerous, there's no doubt about it. We've had some big accidents there over the years. We had a loss of life there many, many years ago as well, as a hang gliding pilot went down in the water. It's just a very unique microclimate. The triggers towards the strangeness of it usually begins in the morning. You usually find that the winds are out of the north that creates this unique bubble. And Ian Ladyman knows it better than anyone. He's studied this phenomenon for his entire life. He could read a book on it, I reckon. There's two main ingredients where the bubble are going to occur. The inverted days, the big heavily inverted days, and where the wind starts out of the north. So usually on those days, particularly in summer, you start to see them, and you can see that exaggerated. Sometimes on the horizon, you can see the inversion. You can see, sometimes we've seen the ships double over, and we're watching a sea breeze, and it's like white capping just, 500 meters, a kilometer out to sea. But here it's dead glass, it's dead flat. This incredible phenomenon happens where this dense air gets caught into it, and it forces the air up and over. When you're allowed to launch out on the headland, the Hengies used to love it because you could launch out in the national parks, before they shut it down, and you could get out there on the headland, and the bubble wouldn't form out of the headland, but you could climb up onto the bubble, and so the Hengies can get crazy height there because they're actually flying the air mass that is hitting the bubble over it, and you can get super high. This bubble formation that happens there. There's some real dangers with Bombala. It's probably one of the closest I ever came to breaking my back. I took off there that day, and it was nice, lovely on launch. It was on, and learnt my lesson big time on this one. And then, so took off. I always fly around to the right, usually, unless it's right around. But if it's right around, I don't want to fly it there anyway. If it's right around to the east, northeast, I don't touch it. I don't go near it. I don't like it because you can get pinned and there's too many rocks. I'll fly it east and that's it. I don't want any further north than that whatsoever. East, southeast, yeah, possibly a little bit. There's all sorts of things going to happen. But that little bubble, it wasn't going way over the top, it was sitting below launch. And that's one of the big dangers about it. That little bubble can actually occur down there in that little corner. So I took off and I had a nice little lift, and then as I've come around, I went, oh, that's not right. My instinct. I didn't trust my instinct, and I should have just kept going straight and put it down. Because I just turned and went, oh, that's not right. And then I came back around, and then by the time I'm coming back around from my left-hand turn, I'm just falling out of the sky. There was absolutely nothing. And I thought, okay, I've got to set up for a landing, on one quick turn. And once I was below, or the wind came back at hill height, and I literally just fell out of the sky. I had in my head that I could turn and come back and do another one into wind. There was nothing. It was nothing. I turned and I literally fell out of the sky. The thing went parachutal. And I've come down and I've literally fallen out of the sky, and I hit this patch of sand, and there was those rocks, that iron part that was like a metre away from me. If I had hit in there, I would have been lying there with a broken back. So that little bubble can form in different stages or different things, and this is what you've got to be really wary of, looking at that water out in front. You've got to wait for that bubble to go, because below launch, there can literally be no wind. It's an incredible weather phenomenon that can occur there, so it's one to be very savvy. And the other thing is be really, really careful on the opposite side of it. You've got the bubble and you're waiting for it to burst, and it looks really, really safe, and then you can take off, and literally minutes later, the whole bubble's burst, and boom, that sea breeze comes in really hard and fast, and you get pinned pretty quick. So it's just a very unique thing. But as I said, the telltale signs, north in the morning, inverted during the day. It happens a lot there. But sometimes that bubble will just form you know, in that morning period. And then just be careful. Again, if you've seen it on your forecast apps that the sea breeze is really going to be kicking in hard throughout the day, you know, you don't want to put yourself into a dangerous position. And then flying down, as you said, the Pyramid Rock. Again, remember, Coriolis force is going to start pulling our wind around. You've got this awesome lift that's dead square, and you start flying that cliff face, and you've got lovely lift, but the air, as you're going down, is actually sneakily coming around on you, so by the time you turn and come back, it's now venturing somewhat along the cliff, so you're going headwind, and you haven't got as much lift. Again, that can be a really scary situation to be into, which goes back to that first one. You don't want to be putting yourself in a cliff face where the air is running sideways to it. It's not a fun place to be, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced pilot. It's just not fun.
Ian Ladyman's now got a weather station at his house.
Yep.
And can that be relied on to detect the bubble phenomena at his house?
No, not really. It's too far back.
There's one at 61 Ballard Street now too.
Yeah,
so
right.
Between the two of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you could, yeah, to have combined information and seeing the data, and again, Ian would probably be looking at that data so much he can tell that it's on, you know, straight away. But that bubble, as I said, can be forming below launch or still sitting there, you know, at launch height, you know. So, yeah. And again, your instinct, you know on that first turn, and that's building that, you know, building those skills and your knowledge to go through it. It's not right. Tomorrow we have not a front, okay. So a front, a trough line passing tomorrow. A trough line will kind of like open up the gate, per se. A trough line is an area where two winds meet and they're forced upwards. So we get these trough lines. Tomorrow we've got two merging highs. There's a high right now sitting over the Tasman, and there's another high that's coming in over southern Australia. The high that's coming in over the southeast is actually going to merge with the high that's over the Tasman. So in between the two, the front is going to be forced away to the south, and that'll be off to New Zealand, but it's going to leave behind like a seam in between the two. There's going to be a trough line. So the trough tomorrow morning should come through about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. So the trough will come through, and then the trough will drift off to the north, and it'll allow a southerly to come through, and it should be a pretty nice day. It may go a little bit strong momentarily, but it looks fairly stable, it looks pretty good. So potentially it could be a pretty nice day. But again, a little bit unpredictable because the two highs are merging together. It's not etched in stone tomorrow's forecast. Not all of the apps have it in the forecast. And not everyone, and I only found one chart that had the trough line drawn in. Knew it was there, so remember, like on the charts or whatever, not all trough lines are drawn in. You know, they're happening all over the country. So there's a nice little example of a passing trough line that can happen that we get on the coast. It's not a front, and they can be beautiful flying actually. They can be really, really nice. They just drift, and they can be not in the forecast. There's no paraglider pilot. When I was into it flying as much as I can, I flew so many trough lines, no one there, because it wasn't in the forecast, it's not drawn in, you know, and just waiting for it to drift, and off they go, and a lovely little cloud line goes off to the north, you know, and then bang, you've got a magic day. It can be really, really nice. But it can also switch around to the east sometimes really quite quickly as well. Looks like tomorrow should come through, it'll be southwest, I'd say, and then it'll switch around, burst in a little bit from the southeast, and then start moving around to the east a little bit. But it should be a nice, unpredictable day. I had a bunch of mates planning to go surfing tomorrow, and I wrote to them and said, it's going to be southerly. And they're like, what? No! And it could be a good flying day, though. Yeah.
Okay, 5 minutes. So maybe give us a comment on, back to Hickson Street,
Yep.
on the out options. So we talked about top landing, but
Yep.
there's obviously a beach landing,
Yep.
and there's also landing in the lower paddock. Now,
Yep.
if you decide to land in that lower paddock, what should we be mindful of from a weather point of view and just going about it?
Well, if you're going to be landing in the lower paddock, chances are the wind speed is coming on pretty strong. So, you know, the white caps are obviously going to start coming on, and if it's quite square and it's getting stronger in that lower paddock, it can actually quite be hard to get down. So again, you can do a big ears landing, but then you've got to be really, really careful if you're doing a big ears down there because it's not smooth. You can roll an ankle down there really quite easily. It has to be quite a pinpoint. You only want to land in that grassed area if it's a complete and utter controlled landing area. And you don't want to land there as the air's gone right around towards the east. Too many guys have gone in there and they've come down way too fast, and you're not going to land exactly where you want to land. So if you're going to land in that grassed area down there, it needs to be, again, out of the south or out of the southeast, so you want it fairly square. And you want to have it at a wind speed that it's a complete and utter control. You want to be able to pinpoint that landing. If you can't, don't do it, because there's just too many areas that you can potentially roll an ankle, and it's just, really not. Don't land there as it's going around to the east too much. Be careful that, if it is strong, you may have some trouble getting down and may not be able to pinpoint it, and therefore apply big ears, and then get to a point you can literally drop out of the sky down there and come down really quite quickly. So in the early, and I kind of recommend as you're coming up through the ranks, all of these situations, build a repertoire of knowledge. If you want to start top landing, don't top land straight away. It took me forever to do it. I was so tentative about it, because it took me a long, long time. And I flew over that launch, I don't know how many hundreds of times, going, nah, not happy, nah, not happy, not happy, and then started top landing. And it was the same with the bottom one. Flew over it and started to feel the air and feel the airspeed, but all of my early ones were always down on the beach until I got comfortable. I went, no, I can do it. And every single time that I tried to do something new in those early days, it was like, no, I'm really confident with it. I never took it on going, oh, I'm not sure about this. So it's like, you want to fly, if it is a little bit stronger, start flying a little bit lower down there, keeping the wing nice and flat with the intention of going safely to the beach, but start to feel the airflow. And it's the same over the launch. If you're thinking about top landing, usually best to do it with someone, under microphone as well, under instruction, giving you the tips, and same thing, start to play, with the big ears when you're out away from the cliffs. When the airspeed is strong, do not be dropping back over launch and not over the cliffs. You want to be out in front. When you're flying the stronger days, you're out in front of the launch. You're well out in the lift band. So you're going to give yourself plenty of time. You've got your speed bar up your sleeve. If you're ever parked, you've still got your speed bar up there. If you apply speed bar and you start to park, you shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. Your speed bar on the coast is your safety. It's like, I've got that to get out of this situation if I've pushed it too far. But again, if you've relied on your instincts, you should have been landing before that moment, came through too strong anyway, so, yeah.
Just the last couple of minutes, make a comment on, we've got PG2 pilots and 3 pilots that now need to get 2 hours and 5 hours respectively of thermic flying.
Yep.
Probably one of the easiest spots for us is Glenny's, Lake Sinclair.
Yep.
Maybe just make a comment about the weather patterns up there and what to look for.
All right, Glenny's actually it can be a really dangerous, tricky place. Got to be really, really careful of it. When it's thermic, it can be really, really nice. It can be really, really great. There's a couple of things that make it a little bit dangerous. It's a beautiful rolling hill. So it actually venturis over that hill, and the takeoff zone up there can venturi over. I've been out flying in the lift band nicely and watched 5 Central Coast pilots get blown over the back, one after the other. One launch, another one. We're just sitting there going, what are they doing? Because they were just launching straight into the venturi. So it can roll up there. There's another venturi that happens right in front of the lake. It's in between the 2 mountains. And you can see it on the water, and you can see the beauty of Lake Sinclair is you have a body of water in front of you. It can be a problem because it actually shuts down our thermic flights, but it also gives you a good indicator. You can see it coming across the water. So the westerly has a tendency to build in the Hunter Valley. You want, again, to fly Lake Sinclair under very consistent circumstances. If there's anything in the forecast that suggests that westerly has the potential to blow out, in the early days, don't bother, because it can blow out. It compresses on that hill, and other things can compress it when you're going inland. Depends on what's layered on top. Again, cloud cover, layers, inversions, all sorts of things will change the venturi of the air that's coming through, because usually when flying there, it's coming through those 2 mountains and it's coming across the water, and you can see it. And if that water is starting to get quite rough, quite dark, you don't want to be in the air. So, when it's when it's too low, you can get a lovely sleddy there and you can clock up hours, but the problem is you can't get up too quickly. So you want a nice day there. So usually in the early days, in the afternoon is really nice, because most of the time we're flying in the winter and you want to wait until the sun comes around. In the morning, the sun off to the right of the launch hits the rocks there. And usually, if I'm launching pretty early, I'll go to the rocks, and it's usually quite thermic there and can be really quite nice, and you can drift back over the launch and the hill heats up really, really nicely. But the beautiful flying there in the beginner days is as the sun comes around a little bit more and starts hitting the face, and all that grassed area and those cliff faces become lovely little bubbles. They're not overly strong, they're just really small, little 1 metre per second. Sometimes you get a 2 there, 3s are hard to come by in that time of the year, but you can get a really lovely little climb. The amount of times that have just gone down to land in the landing zone in that little grassed area gets you a lovely little climb. You can come back up over launch. I used to hike up there or park the car by myself because I thought, well, if I land, I'll walk up. But the amount of times I came back and went back up the top there and drove my car home going, yay! You know, so it's a really, that's a trigger there. There's a trigger to the rock, there's a trigger down in front, and there's another one down where the eagle is as well. But the big one with that is to be careful of blowing out in that situation. Be really mindful. Again, your instinct, if you start getting pinned at Lake St Clair, don't screw with it. It can be it can come on really hard and fast because of everything. Venturing in front of you, and then you've got a compression over the hill as well. So if you're over the hill, that wind speed can really bring you unstuck, you know, really quite quickly. But there are some really lovely little thermals that can happen there, and sometimes you've had great flight there too. All you guys went around the lake, I think, you know, so you can launch. I mean, used to, one of the cool things is launch there. In the westerly, if you can time it right, you can go over the back, you fly towards Vasey, and then you pick up the convergence, and then ride the convergence back out and go to the westerly. That's a really, really cool flight, and literally come back. Or the other one, but you can't go to Vasey because it's in airspace, but that was a cool flight when you could do it. Go to Vasey Airport, go to Vasey Pub, go back the other way, which was cool. Or work your way down the edge. You've got to get past the Eagle Cliff. You know, when you're getting up, and that cliff, that mountain in front's a great trigger. And once you climb out over there, then you've got that coal works, and you can fly down to Singleton, which is pretty good. Or because on the right-hand side, you've got that big, massive mine, you know. But it was always good to try and fly back to Singleton, which is kind of cool. But it's a good little spot. But because of the topography of it, yeah, just watch out for the blowouts.
Okay, thanks.
No worries.